Introduce yourself.
I'm Dencil Williams. I am an artist and a university professor. I used to work as an actor and sometimes model, and I wanted to talk about my existence here in London as a black man. I have lived in London for going on some 40 years, I believe, since 1977. I came here to London to attend St. Martin's School of Art. I remember that I'd applied to both St. Martin's and Parsons in New York. Back in those days, St. Martin's and Parsons were the best art schools you could go to in the world. I had an English art teacher in Nassau, Bahamas, who'd encouraged my parents to send me to art school because she thought my artwork was great. Her name was Pauline Barker. And she suggested that I apply to both St. Martin's in London, England, and also to Parsons in New York. And they would only take 10 to 15 students a year. I applied to both and got accepted to both. I remember saying to my mother, I had a choice of where to go, either New York or London. And as a small boy growing up in the Bahamas, London sounded far more exotic to me, and so here I am. I mean, I could go to the States in New York any time and had been several times up to that point. I arrived here in London in 1977 for St. Martin's, and I was just bowled over. London was everything I had imagined it to be.
So let's talk about Looking for Langston.
Looking for Langston, it's a film I'm very proud to have been a part of. Looking for Langston was directed by a man called Isaac Julian, and Isaac Julian also went to St. Martin's Art School with me. Isaac, I think, was the year behind. And also I knew Isaac socially outside of St. Martin's and through nightclubs. I used to run a nightclub, and Isaac would quite often come to my nightclub, and he was just this giggly little kid that, had gone on to greatness. Isaac had asked me to be part of the cast of Looking for Langston. It was an incredible piece of work, and it's an artistic endeavor by Mr. Julian. I played 3 different characters in Looking for Langston. It's been quite some time ago. It just almost seems like yesterday. It was just incredible to be bringing the story of Langston Hughes to life and that whole era.
Now, how did you feel about, back then, this is 89, and now we're talking about a gay black man.
Yeah. Back in 89, the whole sort of gay explosion was around, so it was very much accepted. And you didn't think about a time only some 20 years ago where, in the early 70s or late 60s, it was legal to be gay. All of them in New York.
Illegal here in London?
All over the world,
right?
And you have people like in all the Stonewall, and there's that wonderful boxer Neil Griffiths. I don't know if you know of him. There is a fantastic book out about him. He was a gay man. In fact, he was one of the biggest champions before Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. You would have Emil Griffiths, but he was actually homosexual, and in his day job, he was an actual milliner. And these very delicate hands, but then could pack a punch. But at the time, you would have Stonewall, it was completely illegal. And for this man to do this very male, butch sport, of all things, being gay, but he would be arrested, could be arrested for his sexuality. But some 20 years further, the gay liberation, my friends like Boy George, Marilyn, the whole gender bender thing, it was an explosion. It's the most fantastic, most accepted thing. Sexually, you would go to Innie's Park day or night, and there are men openly having sex or whatever. So, without edit.
Right.
So again, from something being legal to sort of it just being so there in your face.
And they have those kind of parks here in London. Where,
Oh God, yeah, they still exist.
where
I
are
mean,
they? No.
like I said, I used to run a nightclub, and it put me out of business, because why would you go to a nightclub when you could just go to the park and have a drink and have sex and do whatever and pick up who you want.
Right.
But I suppose all that's gone. I mean, the parks.
Well, that's when I grew up with that. I grew up with much of the parks. Yeah, the parks are gone now because of the apps on the phone.
I was just going to say, that competes now. You can just go for Adam,
exactly.
or Grindr, or Chatterbait, or whatever.
So 20 years ago, Looking for Langston hit you with a script and...
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't so much of a script. I mean, Isaac used me because I had already worked as an actor, and he knew I worked as an actor as well. Both characters, I was cruising, and so someone would just come up to me and sort of we'd go through the motions of what that cruising scenario would be like, what we were just talking about in the park. It's very seductive. Shot in black and white in an old graveyard, and it was just like one of those things. So there's all the touching, and then there's a sort of narrative going on as this is happening. Again, the film explores male beauty and male sexuality, and male on male, and then particularly black on black. That was one of the key elements for me. About my enjoyment of making this film. A friend of mine, a boy called Matthew. Matthew played Beauty, and Beauty had an affair with Langston Hughes. It was quite a brave move to have this film about this gay black man and celebrating gayness, I suppose, what Langston Hughes is about at that time. So it was quite incongruent to, sort of the feeling of the general ethos of sort of kind of the world, I suppose. Right. To have this sort of really out there gay black stand and taking such a stance.
So once you finished the film and it hit the theaters, how was the response?
It was it never ever took mainstream prominence.
Of course not, but within the community.
But there was a sense of pride from Isaac and all the people who were involved with the project. But it didn't have that greater impact here. I don't know about in the States.
Well, in the States it did. At least during the time I was in my youth.
Yeah.
It was the film to watch.
Right.
Because we hadn't seen anything like that. We hadn't seen any two black men touching and kissing. It's always been interracial.
Yeah.
So to see two black men come together, it was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
How long had you been an actor before you got in this role?
I started off working in the theater. I'm a stage actor. I was coerced into becoming an actor because of my diction and the way I speak, and I can talk very much like that.
Okay.
So it's from that, and I realize how I can project myself and sort of... and I quite liked it, and I liked the adrenaline, and I loved the applause.
Okay.
And vain.
Let's talk about after Looking for Langston. And were you an openly gay black man going out for
Always.
And how was that received?
Not good. I mean, I've always been this person you see before you, right from I can remember way back, from my being almost 3 years old. It caused a lot of problems. My parents would say, "Oh, God's put you on this earth to be a man." And I'm like, well, yeah, I am a man. What kind of man, I suppose they were going on about. And I loved my father. I was in love with my dad, and he had some 6 other sons, my half brothers. My dad was married twice, and he sort of, from a young age, 3, he realized I wasn't like the rest of his sons, and decided not to talk with me, or converse, or engage in any way with me, and it hurt me so much. I love that man. And then he died. We'd be at the dinner table, and I'd be sitting right next to him, and instead of addressing me, he would say to my mother or sister, "Tell Dencil to pass the butter," rather than converse with me.
Wow.
And so I, from a very early age, learned to grow a second skin and fuck you. You can't deal with it, fuck you. I am who I am. And I refuse to be anything other. I have always been an out gay man. It's very difficult. Difficult in the sense that most people find that offensive. Why? I don't know.
You didn't have a coming out. If you're saying that at a
I've
young
always
age,
been out.
exactly. So at a young age, because I think we can see it in our children.
Yeah.
You know, and in America, I think they would try to beat it out of you, as your fathers and whatever would try to beat that homosexuality out of you. But you're saying that at a young age, they could see who you were.
Yeah.
So to me, you didn't have sort of a come out. You didn't have to tell anybody.
I never had a conversation with my parents about my homosexuality. One day, someone had rung up and said to my mother, I was, I think, 15. Someone had rung up and told my mother that I was having an affair with her husband.
Oh.
And I was having lunch with my mother that day, and this phone call happened. And I could see her drop the phone, and her mouth dropped, like she was trying to catch a million flies. And she just looked at me, and I knew immediately something was wrong. I probably did sleep with someone who was married and had a wife that knew my mother. And she just said to me in the most really graphic way, are you letting men fool with your ass? Now, as a 15-year-old boy, for your mother to say that to you, it's like, it's quite a yucky thing. And I got up from having lunch and I ran away to my friends for 2 weeks and didn't go home. Came back and it was never ever mentioned again. And every time I see my mother, she always says, I love you no matter what. So I never had a conversation with her. My father had died by this time. He would have probably broken my neck because he appeared to be most homophobic person I've ever met. He died when I was 13, but why he was so homophobic, I don't know. It was peculiar for me because growing up right until I was about 23, 24, I looked just like a girl. You couldn't tell if I was a male or female. And I liked the fact that I was pretty, but I didn't like the fact that people would perceive me as being feminine.
Right.
I never have been. I'm a man.
Right.
You know, I could be crude, could be cute, but
Right.
you know, I'm a man. I remember I used to pray to grow a beard and a mustache. I'd be going to the supermarket with my mother and there'd be wolf whistles at me and I just wanted her to open up and swallow me, even though this is before the your child slept with my husband incident. You know, I was a boy, 13, and there's men whistling at me with my mother.
Wow.
But I made a fortune from it, being pretty. You know, I worked as a model, and and like I came into a time when androgyny was like the thing.
Right.
Hence George and Marilyn, and gender bendering. And boy, could I play that card! But as far so we all are made up of the male and female, but I'm not that. I'm not a passive gay man. I can be, but sex is sex. But there is no. For me, there's no stigma about it. I mean, like I said, whatever happens, happens. If you love someone.
When did you start painting?
I could always paint and draw. I'll give you an interesting story. My parents had a farm. We had lots of ducks and chickens and goats and geese. And as a child, I just wanted to stay home with I saw them as pets. I didn't realize it was a farm. For me to go to school and go off to kindergarten, I just didn't want to leave all the pets. And my daddy, Pa, who I love, he and I were inseparable until he decided to stop speaking to me. That's why it hurt so much. he would take me off to kindergarten at St. John's Baptist Church in Meeting Street in Nassau in the Bahamas every morning, and I would cry and say, "Pa, leave me here," and he could never leave me. And I just couldn't go. I just didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave being home with all the chickens and the geese and everything and the wonderful, beautiful child's imaginary world that I had created in this bubble I lived in. And I didn't know what it was, why I was so against going to school, going to kindergarten. It may have been something to do with the fact that it was at St. John's Baptist Church, and they'd taken me to church a few times, and sort of sudden black Baptist churches, and people having the Holy Spirit, and I was terrified of it and thinking, what the fuck's going on here? And as a child, I just thought I want nothing to do with it. And also, behind St. John's Baptist Church, there was a graveyard that you would have to cross before you would go to the schoolhouse, to the kindergarten. And I, as a child, I must have had some sort of sense of death. And again, I wanted nothing to do with it. So all of those things, I just didn't want to, I didn't like the smell of it, I didn't like anything to do with this thing. And then the separation from Pa, I was in love with Pa, my dad. You know, all those repeatable, negative repeatable stuff, actions were coming into place. And anyway, one day, Pa took me, my parents nearly separated because every day Pa would come home and I hadn't gone, he hadn't taken me to school. And my mother said, you need to make this child stay. And so Pa and the kindergarten teacher, I love to draw. They know I can draw. And I'm 3 years old. Pa takes me and we go to the churchyard, go to the graveyard and everything, and we go into the schoolhouse for the 50th millionth time. And there's pens and papers and pencils and crayons laid out just for Dencil. And this kindergarten teacher says, your daddy tells me you can draw. And Pa says, yes, Dencil can draw really well. And then she said, oh, show me. And there I go crazy for HB pencil and a pen of paper. You know, it's like a sexy man to me. And started drawing, and I started to draw from the exercise books we had, because the Bahamas was part of the Commonwealth. So all the exercise notebooks and everything had a picture of a young Queen Elizabeth. She came to Nassau at one point. But anyway, I started to draw this picture of the Queen. I don't know, I mean, you wouldn't know. It was in a sort of oval shape, and you would have this very colonial sort of kind of crowned figure. The Queen, like me. And I started freehand draw this, and then I looked up, and Pa was gone. I was fucking livid. I was furious. They tricked me. Here I am at school. And I carried on doing this drawing, and the teacher came up and she said, oh my God, that's really good. But your daddy told me you can draw. Why did you trace it? I could burst out crying right now. The paper was fucking card, I wasn't tracing. How can I trace, with a card and everything? Because I can draw anatomically correct from I'm 3 years old. And she said, you lied. And then she had these long talon-like fingernails. And she pinched me. Not only did she pinch me, she screwed her hand around and says, you lied. Your daddy said you can draw. You traced it. When I'm a child, I could barely speak. But I knew how to say, fuck off. And boy, did I say, fuck you. Got up, got my little lunch tin. I'm already angry because Pa has left me in this godforsaken place. And I walked out, to hell with the graveyard, walked through the graveyard, walked through the church, and got onto the main road. Now, I'm 3 years old.
Wow.
And because Pa had tried to take me there so many times, I knew how to get home. It was like about almost a mile. And I walked home on my own as 3-year-old. I'm a baby.
Right.
Could just learn how to walk. And when my parents saw me coming, my mother started screaming, you know.
Why my baby? What's going on? Right.
And I never had to go to school until they had private people come to teach me. Until I didn't go to school until it was time to go to school. You know, because of that experience. But I'm saying that because of my drawing, the woman thought I was lying because I couldn't
draw.
Yeah.
And she thought you traced it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember that like it was yesterday. That's why I get all teary-eyed about it. I remember passing a place called Pinder's Nursery that had a huge terracotta wall. And they had all these most wonderful plants and everything. This is Nassau and it's hot and it's tropical. And I could feel the humidity and the heat and from the steam, the water. It was so hot, you know. It was all damp and everything. And the terracotta wall, I can see the moistness from I can hear watering all the plants. And I went back to Nassau quite a few years ago, some 4 or 5 years ago, and you know, and the wall only comes up to like my waist. So that can tell you, but I was a child, I remember looking up and seeing this huge wall, but like it was like yesterday.
Wow.
And you know, and that makes me, I sometimes take for granted I can paint like Velázquez or Michelangelo, but it's how you interpret, how you use the oil in those canvas. I'm an old-fashioned artist. For a long time, the vogue in art has been conceptual. Your Damien Hirst's, Tracy Emin's, Martin Creed. They're conceptual artists. So for a long time, as an artist, I felt redundant. But painting, traditional painting, oil and canvas, now again beginning to enjoy a renaissance of popularity. So, but like I said, I think this artwork, I mean, it's about my artwork, it's about me, it's about my life.
It was very nice to meet you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate you too.